All right, good morning, doorknobs. Today we are recording class, so don't say any big numbers that you normally say. I've got to be absent on Thursday, so this is recorded for the Thursday afternoon students, third and fifth block, so that they can keep up with us. But I have a doctor's appointment. So here in the morning, you can come say hi. Anyway, we have really a couple of topics today, but the topics, at least the first one, kind of connect really tightly with today. The idea of inflation. And some years in the past, when inflation really isn't a topic in the news, it's kind of hard to understand. But now, for us, I think you all understand it, or at least you will when I start giving you some examples of what inflation means to us during the time of war, or the Civil War, or any war in particular, and today. So we'll go over what that means, how it works. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of vocab terms today, so if you're get my study guide done while I'm going type person, it's a good idea to probably open that up and have that ready to go. And then we will finish up talking about the Battle of Chancellorsville. That's a mouthful just to say Chancellorsville. But it's a interesting day in history because someone dies. That's kind of important. So it's an interesting story about an interesting person. We got kind of a lot of miscellaneous stuff to talk about today. In fact, for those of you that are actually in my class, you see my stack of papers that have to do with today's lesson. So it's a lot of stuff. And some of it isn't stuff that you necessarily have to know. It's just stuff that is good to know or interesting to know or interesting to understand. So that's the direction we're going today. Picking up where we left off, hopefully at least close to where we left off on Monday. Don't forget also that we have Medal of Honor Monday people assigned for, well, what would be Tuesday for you guys, McCoy, Coner, and Tessa, or for the Purple Kids, your names are on the board, so make sure you check that out and stay on top of when you're supposed to be presentating. What got changed?
The names.
They changed it?
Yeah, they spelled them wrong.
Oh, they fixed your horrible spelling?
No, they spelled them wrong.
Okay, so did we get to this point the other day?
Yeah.
To this slide? And I talked about how we are going to watch the movie Glory. I think probably right now, at least as I'm kind of figuring on Friday, we're going to start Glory. And just in case anybody goes home and says, Mom, we're going to watch a movie in history class. First of all, you guys don't advertise that kind of stuff out because, you know, I don't like wasting time. My class time's too important to me. So the only reason we will watch a movie in here is because it is a really good movie that helps us get a grasp or a better understanding of what the Civil War looked like, especially from a black perspective. So the movie Glory is about the 54th Massachusetts. And when we watch it, yes, it is on a VHS. There is a DVD version of it. The problem is the original version of Glory when it came out in 1989 was rated R. School board says no rated R movies. It doesn't matter if the rated R is because of war, violence, and language. There really isn't anything bad in it. Nothing that most of you haven't seen before, but doesn't matter. Can't show it. So they actually came out with a protracted version, a semi-edited version that was PG-13. Still questionable, especially in today's part of our culture because we're ultra sensitive to words. And I think that it's silly that we're ultra sensitive to words sometimes. But I'm sensitive to your sensitivities, so we're going to use the old school version, and if you notice, this one says edited for educational uses. So really cool thing happened with this movie is Pepsi realized how important this movie is to understanding what we're going to watch in the movie and what we've talked about with black soldiers in the 54th Massachusetts in particular and race relations. So Pepsi bought the rights to glory, the rated R version, and then they took out a lot of the bad stuff. So some of the war violence and some of the language. It doesn't mean that there isn't still some that we should be sensitive to, like there might be some words that were appropriate historically, maybe not even appropriate, but were definitely used historically that are not used today. So even though we are going to watch the edited version, that is, Pepsi literally made it and then sent copies of it to every social studies teacher on the planet, I think. So that is old. There may still be some stuff we need to be sensitive to. So we're mature enough, we can handle that. And if not, talk to me and we'll discuss it. But so that's Friday. And then we probably won't come back on Tuesday and finish it. We'll probably wait till Thursday to finish it. So I think what we'll do is we'll watch one day, then we'll come back and have regular class the next class period, and then we'll watch it later. And it's not because I don't want to use 2 class periods in a row, it's because I don't want to watch this movie 7 class periods in a row, because it's every day, for 4 days. Watching the same movie over and over would drive anybody crazy. And I love the movie, but I've seen it a lot. So that's the plan. Probably Friday we'll start that. We'll see for sure. It might get moved based on what my doctor says on Thursday. So, because it really would fit really well for a substitute to do on movie day. But it's not just for fun. We're going to learn too. So I don't feel like I waste time. And I think we probably actually finished on this slide looking at what is it that draws blacks to join or to enlist. We've probably answered these questions, but the brotherhood, anytime you have a group of men who go through a similar event, especially something that might be life-threatening, like war, you develop a brotherhood, you develop a bond, because you've all been through the same thing. Teams go through this a lot of times. By the end of the season, you've been through the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs. So that creates this kinship. Whether you love each other or not, you still understand that you've all been through it. So they've got that. They've got nice uniforms, probably better than any of the clothes that they wear. The fact that the white soldiers are going to trust the blacks with rifles, that's crazy. That's like me handing a rifle over to McCoy. Probably not a good idea. He's going to hurt himself or someone else doing so. But I trust him. So I'm going to give him a gun. Not really. I don't know if it'd be even a good idea to hand him a bullet, because he'd probably drop it on his toe and hurt himself. Maybe. No? Probably shoot Connor with it. Maybe. Okay, so it'd be safe. No, Connor, he'd really only be scared if I gave you the gun, Brooke. Right, Connor? Who would you feel safer if I gave the gun to, McCoy or Brooke? McCoy. Yeah, of course. Because Brooke, she like Yosemite Sam, be like, bam, 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 just shooting things up, holes in the ceiling, all over the place. And then again, patriotism. The red, white, blue means something hanging over us. And all people, whether you're black or white in America, have at least some patriotism built in. Did I tell you this story about the flag that I ordered? Probably not. So I just got done ordering new singlets for the girl wrestlers. A singlet is a wrestling uniform. Plain right now, not plain, simple is the style. So I got it, I think I had it the way I liked it, but I was looking at the picture that the guy from the company sent me. I'm like, it's missing something. I said, it needs a flag. Put an American flag on there. So he goes, yeah, good idea. So puts an American flag right here on the leg. And I'm like, perfect, thank you. And I clicked submit or approve. And then as I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a minute. The American flag, the stripes were purple. It was purple and gray with this. And I'm like, am I just looking at this picture wrong? Is it just a crummy quality, or is that really purple? And the idiot responds back, no, a lot of schools are doing this where they use their school colors in the flag. And I'm like, no. Of course I'm a Blair Bear, but the flag is red, white, and blue. And he's like, okay. In fact, I'm not even sure it's legal to have a purple striped flag on your uniform because in Nebraska, the uniforms can have your school logo or a logo that represents your team, and they can have a flag that's 2 inches by 3 inches, so it can only be this big. Can't have a flag this big. And it's supposed to be an American flag. That's it. That's all that can be on a uniform. So is a flag that has purple stripes an American flag? I think not. Anyway, I made him fix it. Now it's an American flag, USA. But I think that level of patriotism, all of us have different levels of it, but it exists for all of us. America has treated us well. All of us, I think, recognize we have a good life here compared to most places on earth. Other things that are incentives for blacks to join the 54th Massachusetts or to join the military. How about this? You read a poster, now in camp at Reedville, 54th Massachusetts Regiment, African descent, Colonel Robert G. Shaw, colored men rally around the flag of freedom. Okay, so there's the patriotism. Bounty of $100. It's like a signing bonus. If you join up, it says payable at the expiration of your term of service. You get $100. Now you and I, if someone offers me $100, that's a good deal. I like $100 bills. But to them, their pay is $13 a month, which actually is misleading because they're actually, black soldiers only paid $10 a month. So that's 10 months worth of pay. If you had an opportunity to get a job at Burger King and the same opportunity to get a job at McDonald's, and the pay was the same, $15 an hour, and McDonald's says, after you've worked here for 6 months, we'll give you a $500 signing bonus. Which job you taking? They're ultimately the same job. You're flipping burgers and selling French fries. You're going to take the one that gives you the $500 because in 6 months, oh yeah, so this is a great deal. Plus food and clothing and aid to your families. This is incentive for blacks to do, besides their patriotism and their desire to fight for the freedom of their cousins and uncles and grandparents and brothers that might still be slaves in the South. This is a video clip that we're not going to watch today because it's actually from the movie Glory. It's one of the end scenes. And in this scene, they're attacking Fort Wagner. You'd have to really have a good memory to stretch back to the beginning of chapter 16, but Fort Wagner was in Charleston, South Carolina. That's the fort that Robert Anderson originally had his men in before he moved them to Fort Sumter. Excuse me. So they're trying to retake Charleston in this scene. You have to, in your mind, imagine whether they're going to be successful or not. But we're not going to watch it today because we don't have to. I think it's probably an active link on your thing, so you can watch it if you want, but we'll see the whole movie later. Again, more of a brotherhood. We don't see the segregation. We see the blacks and the whites fitting together. And there doesn't seem to be any hatred, any racism. Does it exist? Probably so. Any prejudice? Probably so. But warfare tends to bring that out. And we see that in the American Civil War where blacks are allowed to fight, sometimes alongside whites. Then later in World War I, we pretty much get rid of all the black soldiers. In World War II, there are some black soldiers, but they're used as menial tasks, like cooks and ditch diggers and stuff like that. And then Korea, we see some black soldiers, but not an equal number. And then in Vietnam, we see maybe an overrepresentation of black soldiers as a proportion of the population. And then today, I think we have pretty good equality in the military. I think it doesn't matter if you're black or white. I think everybody is pretty much treated the same. So it's kind of the ups and downs of our history where we see time periods when skin color matters and time periods when skin color doesn't matter. In warfare, as long as I know that you've got my back, I don't care if you're black or you're white or what your beliefs are or what religion you are. As long as I've got trust that you've got my back. Again, we're probably going to trust McCoy with the rifle before we trust Brooke with the rifle. That's fair, Brooke. We know you well enough to know you're going to hurt yourself. It's for your own good. Nerf rifle.
Probably still there or something.
Maybe. You could put out an eye with that thing, right? Okay, a little confusion here, and I'm gonna fix this on the test because it's something that I always have to go back and fix anyway. I used to pretend there's a different definition for the word liberate or liberation and emancipate or emancipation. They both mean to set free. So on the test, the matching portion of the test, liberate, emancipate, don't care, they're the same thing. We just typically think of the word emancipate as being blacks that are set free, but in reality, when you turn 18, you are emancipated from your parents. You are legally considered, is 18 or 19, you're legally considered an adult. 19 in Nebraska, so at that point, you don't have to follow the rules of your parents anymore. Up to that point, you still do. Now, even at 19, some of you still will because you're going to rely on your parents for support with college, maybe some gas money. So, mom and dad are still paying the bills. You kind of still have to follow their rules, just the way it is. And prolong is to lengthen in time. So it could be that because McClellan chose not to chase Lee back into the heart of the Confederacy after Antietam, it prolongs the war. It's going to make it longer and more difficult to fight. All right. Divisiveness. Even in the North, not all Northerners are on the same page. We've already had some discussion about this, like, for instance, not all Northerners believed in emancipating the slaves because there was a fear that they would come north and take away jobs. Not all Northerners believed in the 13th Amendment, so Lincoln's going to have to work really hard to get that passed. Some Northerners were Democrats that were against the war in particular. They're given the nickname Copperheads. Does anybody know what a copperhead is? Not just a snake, but a dangerous, poisonous snake. Actually, copperhead, I believe, is a type of rattlesnake. So why would they call a Democrat against the war a copperhead? What's the connection there? Maybe. They're going to poison the war effort. So there's this big fear of these people. And as a result of that, we talked about this briefly the other day, but sometimes presidents during a time of war have an opportunity to bend the Constitution and maybe take away some of the civil rights that we know exist for us. Like, for instance, the writs of habeas corpus. That's the law that says that if I'm arrested, I have to be charged with a crime within a reasonable amount of time. So that's kind of important. Abraham Lincoln suspends the writs of habeas corpus, which means men can be arrested with no purpose. So if you have a copperhead, a Northern Democrat who's speaking out against the war, or making it more difficult for you to fight the war, what do you do with them? Throw them in jail. You get rid of your opposition. This doesn't sound American. This doesn't sound like a country that really relies on our First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and freedom of press. I should be able to, even during a time of war, speak out against war if I choose to. And just because I speak out against it, does that mean any of you have to listen? No, but I can say what I want to say. This is anti-American, but presidents sometimes can do this because they feel like it will harm the war effort. So Lincoln's not the only one that's done it. Most American presidents during a time of warfare take advantage of war powers or presidential powers, and they sometimes take away some of our rights. Maybe. Other rights, even like the right to property. Lincoln's threatening that by taking away the slaves who are property to the Southerners. That's a fear that they've got, bending the Constitution. We really want those things to happen. We have to change the Constitution, and the only method to change the Constitution is called an amendment. So we're going to add amendments to the Constitution. Slaves flee the South when they find out that there's a greater chance for freedom in the North, especially if they can fight for the Union to help free their relatives. And it's the first war in American history where we see a large-scale conscription. Conscription is just a fancy word for draft. We do not have a draft today in the United States. But we could have a draft tomorrow. Congress would have to pass a draft law, and the president would have to sign it into law. We are ready for a draft. One of the things that we're pretty good at in this country is preparing for the worst case scenario. So we are prepared in case World War III breaks out and we need 1 million more soldiers than we have that volunteer. Right now our military is 100% volunteer. Everybody's there because they joined. But we're prepared if we need more. So all of the young men, when you turn 18, have to register with the Selective Service. It puts your name in a database. And if World War III or a gigantic conflict breaks out and we need 1 million soldiers, all the government then has to do is press a button on a computer and say, pick 1 million soldiers out of those men that are signed up with the Selective Service from the age of 18 to 25, or whatever age they choose to make it. They could be 18 to 70 if they want, which isn't likely because we probably don't want a bunch of 70-year-olds running around fighting our wars. But then the computer spits out 1 million names randomly. It's called a lottery, but it's not necessarily the kind of lottery you want to win. And if your name is chosen, part of your obligation as an American citizen, your duty as a citizen, is to serve. So the last time in America that we had a draft was 1975, at the very end of the Vietnam War. So I was a baby. Obviously, I was not drafted because they don't draft babies. But we haven't had a draft in almost 50 years. Doesn't mean we won't have one, and we are prepared. Right now, as the law currently stands, women do not have to register with the Selective Service. I think probably that will change because women want equality and women want to be treated the same as men. Therefore, I think there will be an expectation that women will be expected to serve the same as men in the event that a draft has to take place. I might be wrong. That's just my educated opinion of what will likely happen in the semi-near future. But a draft, men are forced to fight. What do you think about the drive, the desire to fight and win if you're forced to rather than if you elect to? Is lower. One of the reasons why the United States military is considered the greatest is its size. We are not the biggest military. North Korea, for instance, has more men and women registered for military service than the United States does. But our military would be considered tougher because their military is 100% conscription. Everybody is drafted. Therefore, maybe they're not quite as patriotic or in love with their country. A lot of countries have mandatory service. Even in Israel, a country that's American-ish, it's more like us than, say, North Korea. All Israelis have to serve. It's just part of their routine. So you finish high school, men and women are required to serve. And I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think women are required to serve a 2-year term in the Israeli military, and I think men are required to serve a minimum of 3 years, which means every Israeli has been a member of the Israeli military. What do you think patriotism is like in that country? It's sort of like when you go to a ball game and they say, we'd like to honor all of the veterans in the crowd today. And all of the men and women who have served stand up, and then we all clap for them. In Israel, that's everybody. So there's got to be a tighter amount of patriotism, a greater deal of patriotism in a country where everybody has paid a price to serve. I think that's kind of interesting, though. It's great that we have a country that has enough volunteers to take care of that service for us. And statistically, someone in here will serve in the military. You may not know that yet. You might not recognize that that's you. It might take until you're a senior in high school and you're like, I really don't know what I'm going to do. But the military sounds interesting. So statistically speaking, actually 2 of you will serve in the military. And then when it's time to honor our veterans, I'll stand up and clap for you. Good job. Thank you. Women, look at this. Oh, we got economic changes first. That picture of a woman. Food shortages. Wars always cause food shortages because where are the men that are supposed to be growing the food? They're fighting. It's wartime. When there's a shortage of something, what happens to the cost? It goes up. It doesn't matter whether it's food or toilet paper. You think back to the beginning of COVID, there was a toilet paper shortage, and stores were taking advantage of the fact that there wasn't very much toilet paper, so the price of Charmin doubled. We never had a problem at my house because my wife buys toilet paper by the truckload, so we have enough probably at any given time to last us for a year or two. It's safe. And if not, you just start using your brother's t-shirts. No. Never thought of that, did you? No, you thought of it. It's a good idea. Greenbacks, we see our first currency, our first real paper money. That's why our money is green. We have really boring money, by the way. The other day, just out of the blue, I thought this was kind of cool. Rodrigo brings me this. This is 50 Mexican pesos. And I think I'm going to pass this around so you can look at it, but that's what Mexican dollar bills look like. 50 pesos, this is like $2.50, somewhere in that range. But he gave it to me, and I'm like, well, this is neat. It's colorful. It's not papery. It's almost like it's laminated. And then there's see-through parts on it. There's transparent. So I'll pass it around. But our greenback is really kind of plain and simple, and it's got some things in it that make it difficult to counterfeit, but it's still counterfeitable. Probably more so than money that's got so much color in it. But I also have an interesting story. This has nothing to do with history, but it's part of my life, so you guys know me. Where I grew up, small town, we were the Eustis Tigers. Why Tigers? I don't know. Someone a long, long time ago chose that. Our neighboring town was even smaller, so I told you that Eustis had about 400 people in it. Our neighboring town had 200. And they had their own school, but they were so small, like when it was football season, Farnham played 6-man football. We played 8-man football in Eustis because we didn't have enough guys to play 11-man. There were probably, when I was a freshman, probably 15 boys on the football team. And some of them were not very good. Like everybody played, all the boys in the school played football. That's like pretty much it. So Farnham had an issue because they didn't even have enough guys to field a team for 6-man. So one year they called up my school and they said, hey, how would you guys feel if we co-opt just for sports? Today it's one school, but at that time it started out just with boys sports because there just weren't enough boys. And we said, sure, what the heck? So instead of 15, we had like 20. And then the problem came up, what are we going to call us? We can't be the Eustis Tigers anymore because Farnham had joined us. So we're the Eustis Farnham. They didn't want to go with Tigers, and we didn't want to. Their mascot was the greenback. The only mascot, the only time I've ever heard in the history of the world, a mascot that is $1. Worked out fine because they decided to consolidate the names and they called us the Eustis Farnham or the Farnham Eustis Tigerbacks, which to everyone in existence was really stupid because what the heck is a tigerback? They tried to combine the two mascots. So eventually, and this worked out probably for almost a year, they called us that. And then one day they're doing the football game on the radio, and the announcer, I guess, thought he was being funny. Instead of calling us the Eustis Farnham Tigerbacks, he switched it to the Farnham Eustis Tigerbacks. And that made everyone mad. So then they decided to put it to a vote, and they allowed the students to choose the new mascot, and then we became the Eustis Farnham Knights, which that's what they are today. And instead of just co-oping for sports, it's one school now. So anyway, nothing to do with anything, but a greenback is $1 because it's green. First time in history we're paying income tax. Dang it. Prior to this, all of the bills were paid by selling land or resources that the government owned. Now, part of your income has to be given to the government. This will impact you. Now, if you get a job this summer working at Subway, you're probably not gonna pay any income tax. You'll pay a few other taxes, but you have to make I think the minimum is 12,000 before they start taking income taxes out of your paycheck. So you're probably safe if it's just a summer job, unless you work a lot, or unless you have somebody that pays you really, really good. You're probably not gonna make $12,000 working this summer. Probably not at 14 or 15 years old. In fact, for you guys, it's tough to get a job because most places will only hire 15s. But they take money out of your paycheck. We pay two forms of income tax in Nebraska. Federal, which is money that goes to Washington, D.C., and, state income tax, which is for Nebraska. Some states don't have a state income tax. South Dakota, for instance, doesn't pay a state income tax. So Nebraska gets us. And we get women involved. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but we got Clara Barton. This woman in the stamp here establishes the American Red Cross. She is officially union, but she would nurse, it's a nursing corps, Confederate soldiers as well. So she's willing to overlook which side you're on, and she's only concerned with the health and well-being of the soldiers. So I got this sheet somewhere. I gotta find it. I got too many papers. That talks about the contribution of the role of women. I think it's kind of fun. Not this one. This one's pets in the war. This one's a prisoner exchange. Oh, women soldiers. Okay. How about this story? Albert J. Cashier enlisted in Company G, the 95th Illinois Regiment in September of 1862. He served in Vicksburg and the Red River campaigns under Ulysses Grant, fights at Nashville at the war's end, and was mustered out with the rest of the regiment. Mustered out just means the war is over, you all can go home. So you're leaving with honors. After a routine medical exam, he filed for a pension in 1899. A pension is like a retirement. And if you serve in the military, there are some benefits that come afterward. It was only when he was sent to a hospital in 1911 after a car accident that it was discovered that he was a woman. The old members of her company said they never suspected the fact that she had performed in camp and battle just as well as the rest of the unit. So she fought alongside the men and did just as well as the men. Or Florina Budwin disguised herself as a man and joined the Union Army with her husband. They were both captured and sent to Andersonville, where her husband died. After Union forces moved into Georgia, Florina was transferred to Confederate prison camp at Florence, South Carolina, where she became ill. After a doctor discovered her sex, she was given a private room and special care, but she died anyway. So another woman who fought as a man. Our Katie Brownwell did not disguise herself, but accompanied her husband in a Union battle, performing camp chores. She supposedly carried a rifle and a flag at the first Battle of Bull Run. So women were distinguished in fighting. Now, you might think because of today's news, are these women transgender? No, they just wanted to serve. So they weren't dressed as men because they thought they were men. They were womanly. They just wanted to serve. So not that it matters, but I think that it's interesting to see. It doesn't matter at what point in history there are women involved. It's a small percentage compared to men, but there are women involved. When we look at inflation, this just means the cost of stuff goes up faster than the value of your wages. Inflation in a normal year in America for the last 200 years is about 3%, which is fine as long as my paycheck goes up at least 3% every year. Right now we're dealing with inflation for the last 2 years that's between 6 and 11%. It was higher, around 11%. Now it's right around 6%. My wages have not gone up that much, so I really have less money than what I had a couple of years ago because the cost of goods went up. Like a dozen eggs during the Civil War was $6. Today, a dozen eggs, $3.50. If you want to buy some, I have a whole bunch. My chickens are really laying a lot right now. I'll sell you a dozen eggs for $2.50, and I'm probably losing money at that price because I got to feed my chickens. But $2.50 today compared to $6 150 years 170 years ago. A pound of butter, $6.25. If you wait until there's a sale, you can buy butter for 99 cents. And I'm probably wrong on these prices because my wife does almost all of our grocery shopping. I hate shopping. A quart of milk, $10. I think a gallon of milk today is like $3.50. So today, stuff is cheaper than it was 170 years ago. Coffee. A soldier made between $11 and $18 a month. We talk about soldiers' pay. This is kind of interesting. Not that one. This one. Not that one. Oh, here we go. A union private was paid $13 a month until 1864 when that increased to $16. Officers, a colonel was paid $212 a month. So rank makes a big deal in how much you get paid. A lieutenant colonel, 181, a major, 169, a captain, 115, a first lieutenant, 105, a second lieutenant, 105. Other officers, 1, 2, and 3-star generals were paid $315, $457, or $758. You might be able to afford to survive if you're making $758, but even at these prices, that would be pretty tight. In the Confederacy, it was similar, except their money was worth less. Like, for instance, in 1862, 120 Confederate dollars would purchase $100 worth of gold. By 1865, 5,500 Confederate dollars would purchase $100 in gold. What the heck? Yes, that's inflation, but why such a gigantic change? For money to work, you have to have faith and confidence that the government will exist. So the Confederate government, as it started to lose the war, people lost confidence in Confederate dollars, so it took more of them. Here's an example in my hand, and those of you listening to the video or watching the video can't see this. I'm holding in my hand a bill that says 100 Iraqi dinars from the Central Bank of Iraq. And there's a picture of a man on the front. His name is Saddam Hussein. About 30 years ago, a dinar was equal to $1. So 30 years ago, this would be worth $100. But Saddam Hussein's government in Iraq no longer exists. So do you know how much this is worth today? Zero. When we invaded Iraq and got rid of Saddam Hussein, we captured his palaces and went into the vaults, the bank vaults in his palaces, and he had stacks and stacks and stacks, like pallets of $100 Iraqi bills, dinars. And right next to them, he had American $100 bills. Even though we're the enemy, a lot of the rest of the world uses American currency because if you have to bet on a government that will still exist in 10 or 20 or 100 years, which country do you suppose has the greatest chance of still existing? America. So if you're a foreigner and you're investing in currency, you're looking at US dollars or Japanese yen or Chinese, I think it's yuan. You're looking at countries who you have faith in, or the euro, European money, because that probably will still exist and be a safe investment. So not very much. The cost of those things today, the cost of gas compared to milk, you know, gas is $3.49 yesterday when I drove through Bennington. Gallon of milk costs about the same as a gallon of gas. So maybe pretty soon we're going to have to start finding a way to make our cars run on milk if the price of gas continues to go up. Some other kind of interesting stuff. Slaves in Virginia could be hired for $30 a month, but a Confederate private was only paid $11. So slaves who aren't even people were worth more than Confederate privates. Confederate pay increased to $18 a month. Union privates were getting $16. All right, trick question. Would you rather receive 18 Confederate dollars or 16 Union dollars? 16 Union dollars is more than 18 Confederate. Because inflation in the South was worse than it was in the North. I know that seems weird. The Confederate cornet player, at one point during a battle, was playing his cornet so beautifully that fighting stopped so both sides could listen. These are humans. Humans do human things, and sometimes we surprise ourselves with the things that we do. So I guess that's kind of nice. How about this? The town of Winchester, Virginia changed hands 26 times. So the Confederates would capture it, then the Union would capture it, then the Confederates would capture it. If you lived in Winchester, Virginia, it was a day-by-day thing. Who was your masters? By the way, not connected to Winchester firearms. Or names for the war. It wasn't always just called the Civil War. Mr. Lincoln's War, the Southern Rebellion, the War of the 60s, the War against Slavery, the Great Rebellion, the War of the Southrons. I'm not really sure what that means, but interesting. The Lost Cause. It's not worth anything to us. Other stuff, railroad artillery, putting cannons on railroad. The benefit to that is you can make them bigger. What's the negative to railroad artillery? Yeah, only go where there's railroad tracks. A snorkel breathing device, a periscope. So I could stay down in a trench and look through a periscope using a series of mirrors and look up out of the trench without sticking my head out. Safer. Today we think of periscopes being used in submarines mostly. Filled trenches, flamethrowers. Usually people credit World War I with the first flamethrowers. Revolving gun turrets, the Secret Service. Dang it! They didn't start until after President Lincoln was assassinated. Today, the #1 role or objective of the Secret Service is to protect important people like the president. Abe didn't have the Secret Service helping him out. An income tax, conscription is the draft, the Medal of Honor that we talk about weekly, the bugle call taps. There's an interesting story that's fiction, but it's fun. But after a long day of fighting, there was a Union soldier relaxing at camp, like sitting around the campfire. He didn't fight at night, so you knew the Confederates are maybe a quarter of a mile away, but there's not a concern of fighting. So this Union soldier hears this moaning out on the battlefield like a wounded man. It's dark. So he belly crawls to see the man and help him. And under the moonlight, he can't see him very well, so he grabs him by the collar and drags him back to the Union lines to get him help. When they get back to the campfires, realizes it's a Confederate soldier. And when this man gets a view of the soldier's face, he realizes it's not just a Confederate soldier, it's actually his son. His son had gone off to study music in the South, and when the war broke out, he joined the Confederate Army. So this was literally father versus son. There was also brother versus brother, and uncle versus uncle, and cousin versus cousin. There's one famous story where a Confederate soldier is captured by the Union, realizes that the man that captures him was his father, and as the boy is being dragged off, actually was his brother, as the boy is being dragged off to be taken to prison camp, he yells back at his brother, "Hey, don't shoot at the other side, father is over there too." So how would that be if you're in battle knowing that your dad is across from you? Every bullet you fire might take out your father or your brother or your cousin. Anyway, the story with taps, that's the song that's played at funerals oftentimes or at the end of the day in the military. I know I'm horrible at music. The story says that this guy, after his son passed away in front of him, dug through his pockets and inside his pocket found some musical notes and some words to go with them. So the guy asked his commanding officer if he could have a band play, a military band play at his funeral, and he was denied the request because the boy was Confederate. But out of respect for his father, the officer said, "You can have one musician." So the man chose a bugler, gave him the notes, and at the boy's funeral they played taps. Most likely a false story. That's a good story. It's better than probably the original origin of taps. Both sides had machine guns. Neither wanted to use them. They were fearful that they'd use up all their ammunition. It's estimated during the Civil War that it took over 200 pounds of lead to kill a man and several hundred pounds of gunpowder. So the guns were so inaccurate, if they used 200 pounds of lead to kill a man, they start firing machine guns, they're going to go through their bullets really, really fast. So even though they were available, neither side really used them very frequently. Whole bunch of vocab for your study guide, so take a minute and add those in there if you'd like. I think we're left with one more story. Section, do you need me to go back? We good? Jillian, do you need me to go back?
No, I think it's looking
Okay. Section 3, the north winds. It doesn't necessarily start out that way. So it says Union victories, but if we read this the right way, fresh off of victory at Chancellorsville, Lee decides to invade the north. So it says Union victories, but right here, this first battle at Chancellorsville is a Confederate victory. The problem with the Confederate victory at Chancellorsville is maybe the greatest general of the Civil War, also a Confederate, maybe even greater than General Lee, Thomas Jackson, dies at Chancellorsville. The story of his death is a lot less than heroic. For instance, I'll just tell you the story. When Thomas Jackson is killed, the Battle of Chancellorsville is over. Again, they rarely fight at night. It's an early evening in May, so about this time of year-ish. You know, it starts getting dark about 7:30 or 8. Starts to get hard to see. So the battle is over, and Thomas Jackson, Stonewall, and some of his adjutants, his assistants, are out doing some reconnaissance. So they're on horseback. It's dark-ish. Not dark, but dark-ish. And they're riding around looking at the movements of the Union troops. They don't know that the Battle of Chancellorsville is over. In fact, as far as they know, it might rekindle and start back up the next day. So Jackson's just making sure his men are where they need to be and knowing what's going to happen the next day. Jackson's super smart and super well prepared. But unfortunately, he didn't tell a group of North Carolina soldiers who were on sentry duty that he and his men were going to be off in the distance doing reconnaissance. So this group of North Carolina soldiers from the 18th North Carolina Regiment, led by a major named John Decatur Berry, are doing sentry duty. They're watching off in the distance when they see these men on horseback. And they shout, "Halt! Who goes there?" And the men on horseback, including Thomas Jackson, scream back, "Don't shoot, it's us, it's General Jackson." And John Berry shouts to his men, "It's a damned Yankee trick," and orders them to open fire. North Carolinians, Confederates, shoot Thomas Jackson. He's hit twice in the left arm and once in the right hand. Jackson falls off of his horse. He's in pain. He's like, "Oh, you got me." They fire again. They're like, "Stop shooting, you just shot the general." And then John Berry's like, "Oh my gosh, are you serious?" So he orders a group of men to run out onto the battlefield with a stretcher. They're stretcher bearers, right? They pick up the general, they put him on the stretcher. They're like, "Oh, we're so sorry, sir. We thought you were someone else." And Thomas Jackson's like, "Rah." He just, because it hurts, like, "You shot me in the arm, you jackwagon." They pick up the stretcher and they start running as fast as they can for the field hospital. The story says that the stretcher bearers accidentally dropped him 3 times. So not only has he been shot, but they're like, "Oh, dang it, sorry." And they pick it up and, "Oh, shoot, trip." Poor guy's just getting the snot beat out of him. They get back to the field hospital where they amputate his left arm. General Lee comes to visit the next day because General Lee and General Jackson are tight. They've got each other's backs. They know each other very well. And General Lee famously makes a statement and he says, "You, sir, have lost your left arm. I have lost my right hand." Lee didn't get shot in the right hand. What is he talking about? Your right-hand man. If you don't know what that is, all of us should have a right-hand man, like your go-to. The person that you know you can count on to help you with whatever problem you've got. It might be your mom or your dad or your best friend. It might be a teacher, but you've got somebody in your life that you can trust and count on. So Lee is saying, "I feel really bad, man." Now, they don't know that Jackson is going to die at this point. In fact, he begins to recuperate fairly well enough that they send word to his wife, who isn't very far away in Virginia, that General Jackson has been wounded. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is Thomas Jackson, his wife, just gave birth to a baby girl 2 weeks earlier. So he has a 2-week-old baby that he's never seen before. Mrs. Jackson actually shows up to the hospital bedside where Thomas is laying with no arm, and he gets to meet his baby daughter. Shortly after he meets his baby daughter, he contracts pneumonia. Could be from consuming alcohol before they removed his arm, but his lungs are filling with fluid, and within 2 days, Thomas Jackson is dead. Potentially the greatest general in the Civil War is killed by one of his own men. It's a tragic accident for the Confederates. What do you think happens to John Berry, the guy that ordered his men to open fire? Yeah, he should be kicked out of the army for doing such a thing. No, he's promoted to colonel. Was it his fault? Not really. He was probably doing exactly what he was ordered to do. And considering it might be a damned Yankee trick, that's a smart consideration because the North would do such a thing. So Thomas Jackson, the stone wall, is no longer alive. He's played a bigger role than what we've seen because really I only mentioned him at Bull Run, but he is really a big deal. And to Lee, it is his right-hand man. Thomas Jackson is dead. And I believe we still have some stuff to talk about with the loss of Thomas Jackson in the coming notes, but I think that that's enough for today. I think that's a good place for us to stop. So that's it for today. Once you get that done, just sit in anticipation of what you're going to eat for lunch today.